Sony's next big state of play got delayed, and here's when you can expect it. We're gonna find out very soon if the PS5 can run Crysis, and we've got some rumors about games that might come to PS Plus. I'm sure you guys have heard the joke 100 times whenever a new piece of tech comes out where people say, can it run Crysis? And we're finally at the point where consoles like the Nintendo Switch can actually run Crysis and run it pretty well. But the version of Crysis Remastered we have on the PS5 currently does not take full advantage of the console, and Crytek is coming back to make sure that actually happens. So the Crysis Remastered Trilogy is coming to the PS5 very soon, and it's been confirmed that this will run at 1440p 60 frames per second. Now the controversy there is that it's allegedly going to run better than that and look better than that on the Xbox Series X, and there's a weird reason for that because CryEngine hasn't been working too well on the PS5. There's actually a PS5 exclusive that runs on CryEngine called Returnal, and I'm sure you guys have heard at this point that that game had a lot of issues. People were having it crash to the dashboard a lot, which is really bad because it's a roguelite where if you die you have to start your entire run over, and runs could be up to like 5 hours long in that game. Like you could play through the entire game as long as you didn't die, and if the game is constantly crashing to the dashboard, that's bad. It's honestly kind of frustrating that CryEngine itself isn't being updated or fixed to run better on PS5, because honestly when you look at the differences between the Series X and the PS5, it's not that much more powerful on the Xbox end. It's a very marginal difference, so I feel like running this game at 1440p when the Xbox gets it at 4K just doesn't really make that much sense. That's a pretty big drop, and I really hope Crytek goes back in and figures out some way to make it look and run better on the PS5 as well. We've seen that before with a couple other games where after the fact they get patched and they run just as well on PS5, but still, it's weird that games are launching with this big of a difference on day one. I don't like it. I just did my weekly checkup on what percentage of the viewership isn't subscribed, and right now it says 190% of you aren't subscribed. So you're gonna wanna go ahead, click that red button, and make sure you also click the bell that I think is next to it, and click all notifications. So every time I upload a video, you get a notification right on your phone. Even though Sony wasn't officially at Gamescom 2021, they let Jeff Keighley make a couple of announcements just like they did back at his Summer Games Fest. I'm gonna get the disappointing news out of the way first. So that report from Jeff Grubb that came out over a month ago that said that Horizon Forbidden West was 100% being delayed out of this year into 2022 turned out to be correct. Now that's actually pretty crazy because the last game came out in 2017 and this one started development as a PS4 exclusive, and now it's also coming to PS5. So the fact that there's going to be that big of a gap between the two games is kind of nuts. And also it means that the biggest exclusive we have to look forward to on the PS5 for the rest of the year is Deathloop, which isn't even a full-on PS5 exclusive. It's coming to PC and it'll be on Xbox within a year because it's just like the next game from Arcane, the people who made Dishonored. Obviously in general this is disappointing because I was really looking forward to Horizon Forbidden West because I love the first game so much, but I'd rather them delay it and make sure that this is like a perfect launch rather than release it and then patch it as time goes on. Like what we're seeing with Halo Infinite on the Xbox side, they had an amazing technical test preview. Everyone loved the multiplayer for Halo Infinite, and they already squashed all that goodwill from that multiplayer flighting because they said that they're not going to have co-op in the campaign at launch or even Forge mode. I don't know about you guys, but after Avengers specifically, I'm getting really sick of these piecemeal games where they launch it with like no content and a ton of bugs and they're like, stick with it, it's going to get better as time goes on, and then they do these huge updates that make it a little bit better and you're just kind of stuck there saying, man, I wish I didn't pay $60 for this game at launch because the update that fixed it after I beta tested it for a year just came out and now the game's $20. And I think it's worth pointing out that Sony's always been good about delaying games that need to be delayed. I mean, obviously Days Gone took a lot longer to come out than it was supposed to, and Naughty Dog has gone on record saying that the extra month or two of development they got on The Last of Us Part 1 basically saved the game and made it as amazing as it was at launch. I mean, it got tons of 10 out of 10s, and I play that game every Halloween because it came out in such a perfect state that I remember it being so good. But thankfully there is some good news to talk about with the Horizon franchise. So while we were getting that announcement that Forbidden West was going to be delayed into 2022, a patch went live for the first game on the PS5 that makes it run at a checkerboard 4K resolution at a locked 60 frames per second. I've been kind of theorizing and hoping that they would do something like this ever since they made the remake of Ratchet & Clank free and then a few weeks later made it run at 60 frames per second on the PS5. Because another game they gave away for free was Horizon Zero Dawn, and while this patch is definitely a little later than I think it should have been, I'm just glad they did it. Now how much these patches actually improve games obviously varies from game to game, but I feel like Horizon is a great example of a game that really needed it because not only is the combat super fast paced and like frantic, it's also a game that's been available on PC for a while now and you could run it at 60 frames per second there. So I feel like with first party games they should always make sure the PS5 version is at least on par with what they're putting on PC, and making this game run at 60 frames per second now puts it at that level. So if you're one of the people who's taking a stand against Sony for paywalling a PS5 patch behind an expansion, I feel like this is a good option for you because in my opinion at least, it's the better game between the two. I gotta give Sony credit for how well they've done patching their biggest PS4 games on the PS5, but now that list is getting so small that I feel like it's finally time for them to take a look at Bloodborne. Like there's no excuse at this point. And since we're already talking about Gamescom, I thought it'd be fun if we went through some of the bigger games that were announced, because I don't know if you guys watched it, but that opening night live event was over 2 hours long and they announced a ton of stuff. So the first big announcement that really stood out was a full-on reboot of Saints Row that takes place in Southwest America, and this is like a full reboot, which I guess kind of makes sense because at the end of the last Saints Row story, they went to hell and killed the devil and became the rulers of space-time, I guess. Like, where do you take the story from there? That's pretty much what the developers said when they were talking about why they decided to reboot it instead of just doing Saints Row 5. And obviously that's a risky move, and I like risky moves, so I have no trouble getting on board with it from that perspective. But the thing that's really turning me off to this game is the art style. I watched this trailer from start to finish, and if you took off the end of it, I would not be able to tell you it's a Saints Row game. I would honestly think it's like a teaser for a new season of Fortnite, and that is not what I want from an M-rated game where you're building out a drug empire. I mean, I'm fine with like cartoony graphics because they always had like beefier characters and stuff like that. It was never really going for realism after 2, but still, like this just looks like Fortnite, and that I don't like that art style. There's a lot of games that keep taking the Fortnite art style and then they come out and eat shit. And it's like, yeah, people are sick of that art style. And especially when you're making an M-rated game like Saints Row, it just seems like out of touch with reality in terms of what your audience wants. And also because they brought out the actress who's playing the main character, people thought that there wasn't going to be customization in this game. And then they had to go on Twitter, on the Saints Row Twitter, and be like, yeah, there's going to be customization. And it's like, no, the only reason people thought there wasn't going to be customization is because you guys made it look that way by showing one main character in the trailer and then having the actor come out on stage and heavily allude to the fact that she was the main character's actor. And then the other weird thing that stood out to me is the fact that this game comes out in February, but the trailer that they showed is an entirely CGI cinematic trailer and there's no gameplay within it. I feel like that's a very good sign that this game either A, isn't ready, or B, is going to get delayed. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not like the biggest Saints Row fan in the world. I like the remaster of 3 and went on sale for really cheap last summer and I played it, but I don't know. As far as a reboot goes, I feel like you could do a lot of different directions than what this is going in, but I guess I just have to wait and see until we have actual gameplay. You guys know how much I love horror, so I have to talk about the Outlast trials. This one's been in development for a few years at this point, and it's basically like a multiplayer Outlast game that's not necessarily Outlast 3. And to me, this looks like if you took Portal and mixed it with Saw, and the fact that it's multiplayer makes me very interested in it. I played both of the Outlast games and the expansion for the first one, and I thought Outlast and its expansion were very good. I felt like Outlast 2 had a great premise, some solid gameplay. It was just the story that really fell on its face, but they set themselves up to make something really cool with this game. So after watching that trailer, I'm like all in. It is cool to see also that they're adding in combat to this one, because I feel like if you're doing multiplayer and stuff like that, I feel like it's time for there to be basic combat in Outlast, you know, like they've earned it. I was also definitely excited to see more Death Stranding director's cut. This is the trailer that Hideo Kojima's been working on for a long time now. Like he's been tweeting about it a ton, saying he wasn't happy with the last trailer that came out because he didn't edit it. So he jumped into the game and made his own new trailer. And it's like, it's nice to see a trailer from Hideo Kojima, I will say, but I'll also go ahead and say that this probably didn't need to be nearly as long as it was. Like it showed off literally everything that's being added to this director's cut version of the game. And like, yeah, that's cool, but also let me jump into the game myself and find some of this stuff. I feel like I know everything that's in it now, so I'm just gonna go into the game and be like, oh yeah, I saw that in the trailer. Oh yeah, I saw that in the trailer. The one thing that does look really cool to me though is that Metal Gear inspired level that's set in what looks like an old factory or an old warehouse or an abandoned building. I think that's dope. And also the boss rush mode where you can compete with your friends. I'll probably go back and try that out, knowing that they're doing more combat improvements with the game. Another game that looked awesome to me, like it was tailor-made for me, is Marvel's Midnight Suns. This one's made by Firaxis, the people behind XCOM Enemy Unknown and XCOM 2, two of my favorite strategy games of all time. They're just so much fun to jump into. If you haven't played those, you should definitely check them out. But this is a tactical RPG where you get to make your own team of Avengers, and your main character is the demon Lilith's daughter, which I think is awesome. And on top of that, this looks like Marvel's version of Dark Knight's Metal, which is one of the coolest DC comics of the past few years. Like, I am all in on this. I'm glad they're using newer, updated models of the Avengers. I'm glad they got Wolverine in there interacting with Captain America. The Ghost Rider they're using looks sick. Like, this is a new, original take on Marvel, and I guess, like, I feel okay saying this, you can't really go anywhere but up from where Avengers is at right now. I feel like after Spider-Man comes out, that game's done. Other than Mortal Kombat 11, I'm not the biggest fighting game fan in the world, but this new one called Sifu looks absolutely incredible. It looks like it kind of controls like Dark Souls, but with kung fu moves, and I just thought that the fluid motion of all the animations looked sick. The story seems like it could either be really cool or just something in the background to take you from level to level, but just the combat in this game looks like something I'm gonna dig into and have a ton of fun with. The music in the trailer was also really good. This game's been teased for a while. It's made by the team who made Absolver, which is another cool fighting game that's sort of inspired by Dark Souls. That game came out and people thought it was a little too hard, so hopefully this version of their whole fighting thing is a little bit more accessible. Thankfully, we don't have to wait too long because it comes out February 22nd, and man, I'm now realizing how stacked February is. It's gonna be crazy. We also got another look at LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, and this is a game that was announced a long time ago, and people are just kind of sitting here waiting for a release date, but now that we've seen some gameplay, I can kind of see why it's taking so long. When this was announced, I just kind of assumed it would be a graphics update for the other LEGO Star Wars games, and they were mashing them all together, but this looks like a whole like new thing that has really good graphics, more expanded gameplay than what we're used to with LEGO games, and honestly, it just looks really cool. I'm a massive Star Wars fan. I don't know if you guys can see all these LEGO ships behind me. I like collect Star Wars stuff. But yeah, I'll give anything Star Wars a chance, and unfortunately, they don't have a release date yet for this still. Like, I feel like it's been pushed so many times, but they're saying it'll be out in spring next year, which again, is very close to February. February is absolutely stacked. Like, we have the new Destiny 2 expansion, we have the new Horizon game, we have Sifu, we have Saints Row, we have Marvel Midnight Suns. I'm gonna include that because it's March of next year, which is close enough to February. That is going to be an absolutely stacked time to play games, and I feel like at least a few of these would probably be smart to move. One of the coolest upgrades from the PS4 to the PS5 was the complete revamp of the PlayStation Store app. That thing went through a lot of iterations on the PS3 and the PS4, but I feel like they finally got it right on the PS5, which is why I was so surprised to hear that Sony's already considering making big changes to the store. So Sony just filed a patent for an updated version of the PlayStation Store that thankfully isn't going to be that much different than what we already have on the PS5. It's just going to give us more information on what's already there. So if a game like Apex Legends shows up, you're going to be able to see some highlighted info like that it's free to play, but it has season passes. Or if a game like Splitgate's in beta, it's going to very clearly tell you that this is a beta release or an early access release. And I think that's good because it's really easy to pay money for games that aren't finished on newer consoles because developers keep releasing games that aren't finished and saying that they're in their 1.0 release. But Sony's thankfully fighting back by making sure that they have the correct badges on their games. I mean, I don't know when this update's going to happen, but the fact that Sony's filing a patent for it means that they're actively working on it. And it's just the PlayStation Store. It's not a very complicated app, so I feel like we could see this change sooner rather than later. When you look at the overall UI on the PS5, I think it's getting a lot better than where it launched because a lot of the changes they made really felt like they were just making changes to make changes. The PS4 OS was pretty damn good by the end of that console's life cycle, and doing stuff like making it so hard to get to trophies or see them vertically was just weird to have at launch, and I'm glad Sony's going back and changing stuff so quickly. If you just got done watching the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer for the 500th or 600th time like I did, you probably want a cool t-shirt that references Spider-Man, and boy, do I have you covered. Down below the video in the merch shelf, we have this awesome t-shirt that says my DualSense is tingling, which is still a funny joke to me after promoting the shirt 400 times. So make sure you go check it out. I found an article on comicbook.com that basically lists a few games that they think are going to come to PS Plus in the future as well, and honestly, they make a pretty good case. The first game they picked is Scarlet Nexus, which came out earlier this year, and it's basically a mix between an anime visual novel and like a third-person action game, sort of like Nier. Their reasoning for picking it is that while the game got good reviews, it sort of came and went, so Namco might be smart to take a lump sum from Sony to just put it on PS Plus, and honestly, this is a game that I feel like would hit pretty hard on PlayStation Plus versus something like Game Pass. Xbox has done an okay job adding a lot of JRPG type stuff to Game Pass, but I feel like the true audience for games like that is on PS5. Continuing on with that reasoning, another game they picked that I feel like would be a slam dunk is Judgment. Judgment's sequel, Lost Judgment, is coming out on September 18th this year, so I feel like it would be really smart of Sony to make Judgment, the first game, a PS Plus game in either September or October, while people are really interested in Lost Judgment and are like, oh, maybe I should play the first game in this series. Like, Judgment goes on sale all the time for dirt cheap, so I feel like it wouldn't be too bad on Sega's part to, again, take that lump sum of money from Sony. And finally, they highlighted an indie game called Aragami that's been out for 5 years now. I've never played it, but I've heard nothing but good things about it. And once again, this is getting a sequel on September 17th on PS5. So I feel like September or October would be a great time to make the first game a PS Plus game. Most people who are going to pay for Origami have paid for Origami. And it feels like every few weeks a verified leaker comes out and says, yup, Sony's going to be doing it. And the last time we talked about it, I feel like it was going to be at the end of August. But here we are at the end of August and there is no state of play announcement. But this time we have a pretty verifiable source telling us that it's going to happen in September. And that person is someone who was actually just mentioned earlier in the video, Jeff Grubb. And honestly, I'm kind of believing these rumors because we just got the Horizon delay out of the way. I hate that that rhymed. I don't like that. But yeah, since Sony's past that, they can obviously start telling us about bigger games that we're looking forward to, like God of War Ragnarok. We also know that Naughty Dog is working on a standalone multiplayer game to the point where there's evidence that there was actually going to be a regular multiplayer mode in The Last of Us Part 2, and at the last second they took it out and decided to make it a full game, which is a good sign because that means it was good enough to become a full game. So I feel like if they show us that, a little more Horizon gameplay, and of course some God of War Ragnarok gameplay, that's exactly what fans are going to need to start getting hyped for 2022, because hopefully that year is going to go a little bit better for Sony than this one did. Not that we didn't have great games this year, because Returnal and Ratchet & Clank were both really good, and I've been having a ton of fun with the Ghost of Tsushima PS5 update, but still, I feel like we need some tried and true PS5 bangers. I mean, Spider-Man 2's gotta be in development, right? Maybe they tease that. But yeah, guys, that's all the PlayStation news I have for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think of it down in the comments below, and remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, guys, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.